Right, well, hello. This is Restart Sailing Show, I think 32, John. I'm Simon Lovesley, the founder of Restart Sailing, and joined by colleague John, which I think you're out in Holland now, aren't you?
Yeah, I've actually been here for some time because the elite sailors are still trying to do their preparations as best they can for the Olympics. And for those people who are worried, I mean, everything's been done in a super safe way. I mean, you can't get on a plane unless you have a PCR test, and you can't even enter the regatta unless you do the PCR test. So
Yeah.
that's the modern world we live in.
Right, so back to the sort of usual three stages, isn't it? Which it seems to be one stage, one step forward, one step back at the moment, isn't it, John?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very easy to see things in a very binary sense, as in ones and zeros, black and white, and it's not like that. I mean, we look at the UK COVID numbers in terms of new cases, and you'll see that arguably we are coming up for a third wave. I guess you would call it that. But the big difference now we have is a lot of people are vaccinated. A lot of the people who are getting it now are significantly younger, and there's going to be far less hospitalizations and deaths and so on. So if it's possible just to put up that first graph showing the UK numbers. I
Yep,
think you,
let's just scroll through that. So there we go.
so yeah, if you look at it, you can see, it's very early stages, and of course everything's been done to try and limit this. Um, But as I said, I mean, the key thing is because a lot of people have had the vaccinations, and the people who are getting it are likely to be younger, the outcomes are going to be much better. So that's something to bear in mind. But you're absolutely right, Simon. Unfortunately, we have seen events cancellations, and the Restart Sailing Group is absolutely lit up on the last 48 hours with people, obviously, with quite different opinions.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that specifically in a minute, but yeah, it could be the flavour of the uncertainty as we head through the year, but hopefully more stable times ahead.
So the big one, if we go to the next slide, unfortunately, it looks like the ILCA, in old money, that's the laser under 21 worlds, is not going to be happening in Weymouth. That's a big disappointing to a lot of sailors because that was probably their highlight event of the year, and obviously it's very rare to have a World Championships in your home country. And although I know some people would perhaps argue they're not elite sailors, I certainly wouldn't. I would say that some of them really are. It is a stepping stone to elite status and funding and all the rest of it. So for those sailors, they now need to go to Poland, Gdynia, and all the logistics that causes. And the one thing I have seen that we haven't really come across so far in the pandemic, we do see a bit of NIMBYism. So people have actually literally said on the forums, not in my backyard. And I think it's important just on this show to re-emphasize how safe it is just to be sailing on water. It's a well-ventilated space, lots of UV. And to my knowledge, there's been no documented cases of people catching COVID whilst sailing. And it's the same with the airlines. If people were travelling and there was a huge number of outbreaks, you would have heard of it by now. So as you say, I'm in the Netherlands, and what you can see is the Netherlands cases are on their way down. So we just had a World Cup. So this is actually the last World Cup prior to the Olympic Games. And if you look at the cases in Japan, you can see that the new daily cases is absolutely plummeting, which I think is what we all expected to happen in June. They've already run a series of test events for quite a few sports just to clearly demonstrate that events can be hosted in a safe way. And digressing slightly, because it's definitely not the Olympics show, this is about Restart Sailing and clubs and classes. But we had a decision today about the 2024 Olympics, which I think is probably no surprise that the mixed offshore hasn't been approved, pretty much due to cost and security concerns. So they're going to split the kite relay into a normal men's and women's event to keep the gender balance there. So yeah, on with the show.
So more Olympic news. Yeah, I think as you're saying that looking good on the test events, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there's been quite a few clickbait articles out there, and I was chatting to people about this. That unfortunately, bad news seems to sell better than good news. But if you consider Japan's a population of nearly 130 million, it's probably not going to be long before they have less than 1,000 cases a day. So when you compare that to other countries, they're doing very well, and you can understand their desire to protect their population. But I mean, thanks to the IOC, well over 90% of athletes will be fully vaccinated when they go, and the country's got over 90% of the medical staff fully vaccinated. I understand probably a little bit of a worry with the volunteers, and that's something that we see in the UK with hosting events. The concern's probably more for the volunteers, but if anyone has any doubt, we will be in a very, very big bubble, so to speak, when people go to Japan. So there's not going to be that
Yeah,
contact
and,
with
um,
a
um, and we do
population.
need to be striving to some sort of normality, don't we, in terms of making these things work and
I don't,
adapting to.
yeah, I don't think I would say it that strongly. I just think we need to find a sensible middle ground. We certainly can't cancel everything. We certainly can't go back to normal. And my personal view, and I've tried to put this on the various forums, is that we really need to focus on looking after your local club and do the majority of training really close to home. So you maximise that time on the water and minimise the time in the car. And there's no need to, drive hours and hours each weekend. But at the same time, those major championships, whether it's the Nationals, Europeans, Worlds, or even Olympics, those peak regattas, that's also very important. And in terms of mental health, what's come out to me is actually that 1 week a year is really important to some people. Really, really important. And they need that and they look forward to it all year. And of course, I'm a full-time sailor, or well, I should say full-time coach. So I'm biased, but going for a week sailing, it's much more sort of worthwhile and rewarding than just a normal week's holiday.
Well,
And if
that's
you're
right.
out on the water, I mean, that's the best environment to be. The situation which we need to be worried about is when clubs, as in nightclubs and bars and restaurants, open up with less restrictions, and if everybody ends up crowding indoors. Out on the water is just fantastic. In terms of hospitality, I've also got to say I quite like outdoor table service. I think that's the that's the way forward.
Yeah, and it's great to see how the pubs have adapted to that and building little outdoor sheds and canopies and things like that.
Well,
So
without tempting fate, I think the weather's now much more suitable. And even if there wasn't a pandemic, you would see less respiratory disease in the summer than the winter anyway, because
yeah,
to some extent, COVID is here to stay.
yeah,
It's not going to be as it is now, but just like we have flu all the time, I expect there'll be some sort of COVID in the flu strain 20 years' time. So, yeah, we need to restart sailing in the safest possible way. And it's
yeah.
definitely not a binary. It's definitely not a binary thing, yes or no. It's what's appropriate. And
Yeah, and it's good to see on the group lots of different sort of opinions and a good vehicle and for people to share their ideas and share their experiences, isn't it?
yeah, I just encourage everyone to come there, open-minded. I mean, it's made a lot of the comments they've made me really rethink, and I certainly think one size doesn't fit all. If you look at the Weymouth Port and National Sailing Academy, you've got a huge space, so it's appropriate there that they can host more numbers than some of the lovely little clubs we have up and down the country, which are great sailing venues. But if there's limited space, that limits the number of people who perhaps could be safely there.
Yeah. Right. So, quick chanter through. We've obviously passed March, past April, and I think 17th of May, and we're heading towards the 21st of June, isn't we? Which is a
Yeah,
big unknown at the moment.
yeah. I think at the moment, I think it's probably more likely than not. But we just have to see what happens with the numbers. And I think probably the key statistic people in the background will look at is not how many new cases we have or even the total number of cases, but it's the load on the hospitals, because we don't want people getting so poorly that they have to go into the hospitals. What we want is to keep the hospitals empty, as it were, so that all the other operations and things that they do that are backlogged can get dealt with. So if anyone was wavering on having a vaccination, it's for the good of everybody and protecting yourself. And I think that's been really clearly demonstrated in what's
Yeah,
happening at the
and
moment.
it's amazing how rapidly we're ramping through the age groups. We're pretty much down to the youth sailors now, aren't we? Or the youth, you know.
Yeah, I mean, UK, we've been very lucky. Some countries are a long, long way behind us, and for their athletes, they had to get the shots via the Pfizer shots via the International Olympic Committee made special provision to get them there. So yeah, in the UK we're super lucky, and you should really take advantage of it. And I say, if I know quite a few people who've had COVID, and I can assure you the side effects of the vaccine are so much better than
Yeah,
the side effects of COVID.
yeah,
And,
and it's been
and the
impressive
hangover.
how they've focused on sort of areas like Manchester and sort of thrown all the effort to get more people vaccinated quicker there, which will really, I think, sort of get us out of trouble. Right,
Yes, here's hoping.
right. So, sorry, missed the REA. I missed the
Well,
REA.
this document, to my knowledge, hasn't changed. It's still there on the group. If you look under files, all the information is very clearly there. And I hate to say it, I think we're all fairly experienced now with the pandemic, so we should know what we should be doing and what we should be doing. I think if
Yeah, and I
nothing
think
else,
most of the messaging is consistent. There's obviously, I think, confusions over travel, which obviously you'll be familiar with, but a lot of the messages now is following a pattern, isn't it? That we know what
yeah,
to.
that's obviously the biggest debate a lot of the time. Travel. I say for me, I look at travel not only as a thing for the COVID times. But I think it's generally nice to train close to home. I know as a coach, if I have a 3 hour drive, it's harder to do a good job on the water than if I have a half an hour drive, and my job isn't physical at all. So I do think it's nice to support your local club, and it's so nice to see all the zests and the toppers and the optimists out, because those are the people who are going to be the backbone of sailing in 20 years' time.
Yeah,
So I hope we can really see the clubs flourish after this, and that big championship as well, that nationals, etc. That definitely has a place as well. And my heart goes out to any classes which have lost their event, like the toppers, for
yeah,
example, for the
yeah,
second year running.
yeah. Well, we'll come on to that in a minute, but the evidence is that the events going ahead are just booming. Massive numbers really that we haven't really seen in decades. I think in terms of.
Yeah, fastest finger first with the entries
Well,
sometimes,
that's right.
but there we go.
Fitting it in, but we are sort of seeing a bit of a trend, as sort of discussed on the Facebook group today, about more events cancelling. You mentioned the toppers, the Fireflies announced today that they wouldn't be holding their championships in lieu. The Enterprises aren't going to Brixham. Things like Abersock, Dinghy Week have been cancelled, all for different sort of reasons. But I think it just shows you how challenging the environment is for any of us in organising events.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, lose a difficult venue due to the size. I mean, hats off for making early decisions. So I guess people will have some opportunity to get, if not a full refund, but some of their money back. But Fireflies, I think it was their 75th anniversary, and that was, going to be a special one. And I'm talking at the moment. Hopefully, we'll be able to chat from somebody from the class association next month. But the class has got the enthusiasm, so I'm sure it'll go for strength
Yeah,
to
yeah.
strength. It
But
is
I think
frustrating.
one of the trends is that it's the sort of the third parties. So, for example, the Welsh events are not going ahead because they need approval for the Welsh local authorities, which they're not getting in a
Uh,
hurry.
and I also think it's very hard in terms of the volunteers. If people have got their business in hospitality or whatever, if people have had a really tough 12 months, it's quite hard to get people to volunteer a whole week of their time to help an event run. I mean, I really do understand that. And it is what it is. It's a bit of a cliche, but that's where we are at the moment.
Yeah, and I think part of the issue is things are just changing so quickly, and events are a bit like an oil tanker, aren't they? You can't just sort of move them in a hurry, and I think it's sort of unfortunately,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, it did make me laugh. With less than 50 days to go, people were saying, "Oh, let's just move the venue
yeah,
for the Olympics." I'm thinking, do you
yeah.
have any idea how long it takes containers to get to Japan?
Yeah, well,
So,
even for a championship, you're looking at 2 year lead times, aren't you? Often, and
I wonder if one of the silver linings that comes out of COVID is people get used to putting championships and volunteer bases together much quicker. But we'll see.
well, yes, and I think as someone commented today that until you're involved in organising, you don't actually realise what goes on in the background and how much needs to be done, and how many permissions you need to get, and how much cooperation you need to get from the local council and things like that.
And
those,
I can assure you the venues are just as disappointed when the events don't go ahead.
well, that's right, and I think it was sort of talked about. You can't have the blame game, but it's not really blaming anyone, isn't it? But it's just
or clubs versus clubs, or class
yeah,
versus
yeah,
class. We're all sailors. We're all
yeah,
in it together.
yeah. It's just a sort of the perfect storm of, can the council let you in? Is there enough car parking space? Can they move things to get a dinghy park on the foreshore and things like that? Is issues that don't happen overnight.
And actually, the thing is, in terms of numbers, actually sailors and championships for nearly any area would actually represent quite a small number of people. As I saw the number of people flying to Faro Airport to go to Villamora.
Yeah. But I think part of the issue is when you get to places like Loo and South Coast venue, they have to clear space for the dinghies, don't they?
Now that's disappointing, but
yeah,
understandable.
and you're seeing those battles elsewhere. There's a club in the Midlands where the council want to effectively create a car park where the dinghy park is. So you're getting those conflicts of interest and things like that. So I think it's one for sailing to keep an eye on. I think because as we said, the access to the water is very important, and it's obviously valuable land which has value to someone, and other people may have ideas of how that land is used.
Yes.
But it's an ongoing battle. Right, so moving on. I think
so we have the wonderful Finn class.
Introduce
hopefully John is
John.
there.
There's John.
Oh, such a relief.
Hi. Thanks for asking me on.
such a relief. So, I mean, I think it's far better for you to speak than my good self. But I mean, I think we see the Finn as, an ideal boat for the heavyweight sailors, and we would just love to see more in the clubs all around the UK.
Yeah, well, we've actually had quite a growth through the lockdown period of sailors wanting to sail single-handed boats, because obviously when sailing did first restart, you had to be in a single-handed boat, and we've had quite a few new people come into the class and people return to the class. Obviously,
and you have a very, very good master circuit as well, don't you?
We do.
We need to talk about that. It's not just for young.
Well, we're a bit worried that that people see the boat now as an old man's boat, particularly since the Olympic decision to drop the Finn from the Olympics. In the UK, we had a very successful British under-23 squad, which we started in 2013, which was sponsored by GSE Pindar. They had their own coach, and we were capturing the lads who had grown out of the laser. We had 8 people who were 6'2", 6'4", age 17, and they're not hugely overweight people. They were just their body form. They had that height, and it was impossible for them to keep down to weight for the laser.
No, absolutely. I've walked around a few Finn boat parks, and I wouldn't call any of them overweight ever.
Well, you look at Giles Scott. He's a very slim guy. He just happens to be 6'4", and he's got a huge leverage. In my day, Finn sailors looked like England prop row forwards, and they used to carry weight jackets that wasn't very healthy. But now, with the dynamics of the pumping downwind, they're very fit athletes, and they're all tall lads who aren't physically capable of keeping their weight down to sailing,
and shouldn't either. It's very unhealthy to put on a huge amount of weight, and it's very unhealthy to lose a huge amount of weight from your natural body size, because for the people who are sailing a lot of the time, your body is always going to try and revert to what's appropriate for your frame.
Exactly. And I think it's a bit of a shame that the Finn had this name in the Olympics as the men's heavyweight class, because I'm a Finn sailor, and I'm probably I'm 83 kilos and 5'7", so it's not, you don't have to be massive. It helps obviously a lot in the
I'm sure it helps in the big stuff.
But I can win races when it's light, and I have an advantage with the modern carbon rigs. You can choose a rig to suit your weight. The sails are a lot more adaptable. You can have flat sails that you can tuned. So
Yeah,
it does.
we talked with the Europe class about this a lot, about fitting the rig to the sailor.
Yeah. You know, and yeah, ultimately at Olympic level, you've got to be about 96 kilos and 6'2" at that level. But at the masters level, you know, you can be, you know, any size of shape, and there's a lot of big, we say not quite.
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh
guys.
like that.
The fin does carry weight well, so
Yep.
as long as there's some breeze, you know, you can. The bigger guys can survive, but it does reward. You know, tuning the rig. It's a more technical boat, obviously, than some of the strict one designs, and that's why fin sailors throughout the years have graduated to America's Cup and offshore racing, because you know the boat does teach you a great appreciation of how to balance the rig. It's all about balancing the helm. You move the rig forward and back to match the wind conditions, and you know, I think we counted up, there's about 16 recent fin sailors who are out in the America's Cup recently across all the teams. So, you know, you have to do everything yourself. So it's no surprise that, you know, Giles Scott and Ben Ainsley were the top guys sailing for Britain. There's Ben Cornish was there. There's some of the grinders were fin sailors.
Well, yeah, I think any big boat, you need a strong man. So it's a natural stepping stone, isn't it?
They're bright, strong men. You know, they're not the sort of guys there to lard on the rail. They're there because they understand how the boat works, the aerodynamics of the sails, as well as the whole thing of the race tactics and you know, how to manage a race course.
And how about the class racing in the UK? What's the situation been during the previous COVID period, and what's it looking like this year?
Well, we had to cancel quite a few events, obviously, when the travel restrictions were on. But as soon as they were lifted, we managed to have our first open meeting of the year at Bow Beach in May, when we were only allowed to travel close to home. So that was a one-day event. We had 20 boats that entered that. And then we've got our nationals. We've got the Masters Championship coming up at Menjin Bride in a couple of weeks' time.
So is that near Hailing? Just for people who don't know the.
Yeah, it's just around the corner from Hailing Island Sailing Club.
Yep.
They sail from sailing out in Hailing Bay, so it's the same water basically.
Oh, perfect! That's a lovely, lovely place to race.
You know, I think all these guys, as you were saying earlier on, they're desperate to have their week of sailing. The Finn World Masters was unfortunately cancelled because that was supposed to be in Medemblik. So there's stories about 10 boats coming down from the north, and it's going to be a really big event. And then we have our national championships in the Rotorua Bay, the 9th to the 11th of July. So everyone's gearing up for that, and again, that should be a big event.
And that's hopefully after we move into step 4. Hopefully, yeah. Without tempting fate.
Yeah. Well, as long as we can travel and people can use hotels and B&Bs, then we should be all right.
So how many days was that over?
That's a 3-day event: Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So that's hopefully manageable for people. And then there's other things like Federation Week, Chichester Harbour Race Week. There's always a big thing contingent there. We've got our Traveller Series that includes, we've got a new event at the Royal Lymington Yacht Club in August. And then Christchurch, which is another big fin base, sailing out in Hailing in Christchurch Bay. That's in September. So, yeah, if we're allowed to sail, we're going well. The World Masters is supposedly being rescheduled for the Mar Menor in October, but again, are we going to be allowed to travel to Spain?
That's a fantastic. I went there to look at foiling, and I think Ben Ainsley's team did a lot of practice there. So it was previously meant to be in Medemblik, did you say?
It was, because it was supposed to be in Holland in 2020 when it was cancelled then. So it was then given to Medemblik as and they were supposed to run it, but again, the travel restrictions didn't allow. So yes, we were hoping, because we've now missed 2 years of the World Masters, which we've had up to nearly 400 entries.
That's amazing. So I guess it's a numbers problem, because we didn't have any fins at all at the Alliance Regatta, but they did have a cap.
Yeah. well, it depends. I think a lot of them were out in Porto. They just had the Finn Gold Cup in Porto a few weeks ago, and I think a lot of them were staying on there to train because it's similar wave conditions to Enoshima. But it's sad that the under-23 World Championships is dropping off in numbers. So we had this team of 8 lads who went in 2018, 2019, and there was sort of 40-odd boats. There was only 10 last year and had it in France. So all these young sailors are leaving the class because, they don't see the Olympic future for them as being removed. And, there is no other boat in the Olympics that can take a 6'2", 90-kilo sailor. So, we understand the gender equality issues. And it's a shame. I think the Finns should really have addressed the issue back in 2012 and come up with a solution then. But it's going to be hugely it's discriminatory against these lads who are that size, that they can't find any Olympic class to sail.
So John, one of the questions we get about people getting into the class is there a way of getting into the Finn class? Is there a demo boat and access?
We have if you can go to our website, there's a Finn brochure with contacts for all around the country. We have fleets where you can go along and try a boat. To make it more accessible, a few years ago we developed the idea of classics with carbon. So you could buy an old classic boat, a Vanguard or a Pearson, and then upgrade it with a modern carbon rig, and you can get on the water for under £1,000. So youngsters could do that. But and that was quite popular. There was a big fleet of even the MD of Harken had one down in Leamington. There was a fleet of a lot of professional sailors there. They were boat skippers, and they all got these old Harken boats. And if you put a new modern mast gate, so you can move the mast forward to balance the boat more, they had some great racing, and you can buy these boats really, really cheaply. And then the other thing, through lockdown, there's been a huge upsurge in wooden fins. If you go on Facebook,
this is the traditional.
Well, it's a bit like sort of vintage cars. The guys will have a wooden fin as their second boat. They'll strip it all down. They'll restore the wood beautifully. Then they'll put modern fittings on and a carbon rig. And there's a whole wooden fins group on Facebook you can go and look at. And there's guys. It's taken off. We had quite a few in the UK, but now there's Australia. There's the Netherlands. It's really the vogue thing to
you end up with like a beautiful piece of furniture. It seems worrying to take it on a close encounters race course.
I did a ferry fin up, but when my fin was in the container going to Greece to the World Masters, I raced it in the open meetings, and on flat water it was really quick. I mean, they tend to hobby horse a bit in the chop, but with a carbon rig, they're stiff as anything else. But it's the magic in the fin is about not making the boat too stiff. Some boats have been built, so the black art is knowing how much give to have in the foredeck around the mast area, and you can build a boat that's too stiff and it's too, it just doesn't work. So it's all about getting that combination between the stiffness of the deck and the whole deck joint right. But no, they're quite competitive in flat water areas.
Well, fin hulls just last a very long time, don't they?
They do.
Competitive life, I mean.
Ben Ainsley chose to use his Rita at the London Games, I think, and Giles Scott, I think, will be using his previous boat in Japan. So that they do, they're a good investment. They don't lose their value much, and that's another great attraction of the class. And you can buy an older fin. They did bring out these Fantastica hulls a few years ago, and yes, they are faster in some conditions, but they're not quicker. They're slower in light airs.
So maybe they're optimised for one condition, which is
they're less rocker. They're flatter. They do plane a bit quicker. They're faster on a reach, but on a windward leeward course, it doesn't really come into play. But because all the Olympic guys got them, they all followed each other. So
That's how it works.
that's how it works. Yeah.
But I mean, the thing I'd like to emphasise, I mean, the Finn is still going to provide absolutely world-class racing, and I completely get that. People wouldn't want to change class, even though the skills are transferred. People want to sail a Finn. I looked at Connor, who's the top kiteboarder in the UK, and he's 190 centimeters tall, 95 kilos. But people who want to get world-class racing for the Finn class will be able to do that, and because the Olympics, it's actually and that's one of the very sad things. It's a very small part of sailing. The bedrock of sailing is clubs and classes, and the sad thing is actually the number of talented sailors who don't get to go to the games. So I don't think people need to worry that if a class is non-Olympic, that it won't be super competitive, because I guess the international moth class is arguably one of the most competitive classes, and that's not Olympic, and I don't see it ever going Olympic.
Absolutely, and I think the way the Olympics is, I worked for the London 2012 Olympics for 2 years, so I know all the ins and outs of, and it is becoming a business. It is all about the broadcast rights, and I think it's a bit of a shame the world sailing is, they're chasing this higher broadcast figures so that they can get a bigger revenue from the IOC.
And it's the biggest lump of their income, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. But I mean, if we're now having break dancing and roller skating and everything else in the Olympics, it is becoming less representative of the major sports.
Although I've got to wonder, do the break dancers look at us the way we the way we look at them? I don't know.
But I mean, you can argue. I think even some of the senior figures of the RYA don't recognise the kiteboarding as a discipline of sailing. That they should really be aboard sports. You've now got surfing, kite surfing. They should be run by a separate organisation.
Yeah, that's a bit sad, because in my experience, I've never seen a more transferable time in my life. You get the 49er sailors in Weymouth, and they come off and they can't wait to go moth sailing. And all the Ilka girls at the moment, as soon as they finish sailing, they see laser sailing, Ilka sailing, they seem to want to go off winging. And I see lots of people do lots of sports. And as a sport, I think we have to come together, not this us and them, because I've never seen more commonality, and the skills are really transferable in sailing.
I'm sure they are.
If you're good at one thing, it's only a matter of time to pick up the other. And I think with the number of sailors that we have, the future is looking after the grassroots, the club sailors.
Yeah, I think so. We're trying to do in our local clubs. There's a great effort in training the youngsters, but they tend to do just training. But then there's a big gap between the club racing. So, at Warsash, they're very good. They get all the kids joining in the club racing in the evening races. But at Menjum, I also sail at Hayling, they've done a great job with the kids, but the kids aren't joining in the club racing. So we're now trying to get them engaged, because probably when you first started, if you're starting in your fleet 5 minutes after the fast handicap, and you see the way the top guys start and which way they go upwind, it's all part of the learning process, and hopefully it'll encourage them to get out racing more often. But
for me, the key thing is getting them at the club, whether they race there when they're not, but getting them to the club and getting them to want to go to the club every Wednesday evening and Sunday morning. That's
But just going back to what you were saying, John, about the Finns surviving after the Olympics. Yes, so the Olympics isn't everything, but it's important that there is a top end of the sport, and the BFA, our British Association, would like to see something like the Star Sailors League for the top professional Finn sailors.
I mean, they've done so well, haven't they?
They have. And they've had a lot of Finn sailors.
I love to watch it. It's actually been some of the most enjoyable to watch because of the close racing.
Yeah, and it wouldn't take a lot, because I say they've invited a lot of Finn sailors to sail on the Stars, so it wouldn't take a lot to add 4 days of Finn sailing before the next Star Sailor League event.
Well, for many sailors, that was their natural progression, wasn't it, into the Star from the Finn?
Yeah. I mean, you look at Ian Percy, Bart Simpson. I'm sure if Ben Ainsley had the time to do another Olympics and the Star had been there, he would have.
I think he may have considered it, but you'd have to ask him.
But yeah, so that's the way we would like to see a Grand Prix circuit to keep those top athletes involved, because at the moment, unless they can find a benefactor to buy them a mixed offshore boat or a
well, the mixed offshore is not in the Olympics either, so
it's not. But I mean, that was what they were. That
a kite. It needs to be a kite. Yeah.
It may be in 2032. Because it's a difficult one.
Yeah,
because I would love just to see some stability with Olympic classes for 2 cycles. But anyway, we're back to clubs and classes.
And
I think that point about being able to get into the Finn class at a really low buy-in fee, I think that's a very, very positive thing.
Yeah. And I think it's so encouraging when you see how the class like the Europe and you say the Star have flourished, outside of the games, isn't it? So.
Yeah, so there's no reason you can sail the Finn, whatever level. You can buy an old boat, as we were saying, and it will be competitive. All you need is and the other thing is, in England, we're lucky with the Olympic squad was there. We could always buy their second-hand sails that they use for just a week. So there was a ready supply of good second-hand sails. So that's why the class has grown so well over the years. So yeah, it's a challenge to us now to try and carry that on and come up with new events that people want to do. But the World Masters seems to be a very very popular event that everyone likes to travel to. It's getting more and more competitive. There's more ex-Olympic guys. There's Rafa was sailing last time, and a lot of in the UK we've got Lawrence Crispin has come back, and I made his sails when he was campaigning in the Finn back in the 80s. He's a laser world champion. He hasn't lost any of his ability. And we've also got another Finnish guy, Christian Soberg, who's based in UK, who's been racing on the circuit, and he did the European with the Olympic circuit years ago. So all these guys are coming back into it, and it's adding to the standard and teaching us all some new techniques. And we're lucky we have access. We get some great coaching from some of the, Matt Howard and Dave Howlett. When they've got time, they come out and give us some tips over a lot of that UK knowledge base of the Finns is being passed on. So it's quite a competitive fleet.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for coming on. We're really delighted to have a chance to promote the Finn class. And I just think in the world of sailing, we're so lucky to have such diversity. There's place for everyone, and I think the more people sailing, the better. So thank you ever so much.
Okay, thank you, John. So back to other matters. So the Selden Sailgist Winter Series continues through the summer. We've now got to our second event with the Grafham event last week, believe it or not, and the next event will be the Medway Marathon, which will be in sort of 10 days' time, and as the name implies, 26 miles around the joys of the Medway, and then we carry on to the Tiger Trophy at the end of the month. The end of August. So hopefully to complete a winter series that has gone on and on. But hopefully we're going to get.
It's almost a misrepresentation talking about it as a winter series.
Well, it is. Unfortunately, we only managed to get one event away. The Datchet event in December, and all kibosh to all the lockdowns. But hopefully we can get another couple of events in to make a series, and then we're back to hopefully normality with the Draycott Dash in November, and hopefully we'll see the standard 8 events coming through the winter. Fingers crossed.
Well, fingers crossed, and we're trying. put any information out there nearer the time, because the winter is a fantastic time to go sailing if there's no restrictions.
Yep. Okay. So right. Oh.
So my little this is probably not the best show to do this, but I thought this was an interesting one just to talk, because I have a lot of questions about how it works with a unstayed rig, because that's something that we sail a lot in the UK, and this is a little diagram just to show how we're looking at powering up and depowering the rigs. If you think about something like a topper or an Ilka or something like that, where the mast bend is purely controlled by the kicker tension, it makes it quite difficult. So what you're always looking for is the perfect amount of power. In other words, so you're just on the verge of being overpowered, but you're not. So if we look in the upwind kicker tension for an unstayed rig at the beginning, so that's when we're in under 5 knots, around 5 knots, those barely raceable conditions, you're actually having quite a lot of kicker there to depower the sail, to reduce the drag and to put that mast bend in. And that's quite different to what you would expect in nearly any other boat. I mean, this is just a very typical diagram to show you what the waveform looks like. So we've put the max power in here at about 10, 12 knots for some classes, depending on your weight or particular rig you have. It may be 15, for example. But basically, when you can take maximum power, that's when you have the minimum amount of kicker, because you don't actually want to bend the mast and change that sail shape at all. So in terms of an Ilka, we talk about being block to block. So you've just pulled the sail in as hard as you can, you take the slack out the kicker, and then we go up to the upper wind range. So we have the medium wind speed at, say, sort of 22, 25 knots. We're gradually getting more and more overpowered. And it's quite simple. We're just adding more and more kicker. And in order to keep the sail balanced, to keep the centre of effort in the right place, when we're adding kicker, we're also adding Cunningham. So the idea is that centre of effort is over the centre of resistance, so the boat doesn't try and go head to wind or constantly bear away. But the kicker is probably, for a lot of those unstay rigs, the key sail control. You know, when I first started, we had things like 3-to-1 kickers, whereas we now have 16-to-1, if not more. But to finish the graph off, when you get into survival conditions, and I've just put it here as 30 knots, but maybe it's 35 knots if you're really high level of competency, you just need to make the boat more sailable again. So you start letting the bang off, you let the kicker off to let the boom go higher so it doesn't catch the waves, so it's easier to get through attack. But you do leave the Cunningham downhaul right on and keep that centre of effort as far forward as you can. So you'll see that actually sometimes you might need to do that in terms of boat handling, that when it's a really windy day, you actually let a little bit of kicker off to make it easier to get through the tack, or even just because it's easier to get under the boom. So I think people are actually more used to rigs that you can change, and you can pre-bend the mast, or you can rate the rig. But if you've got a very simple unstayed rig, the kicker is much more complex than just that middle part of the graph where you put it on when you get overpowered. So hopefully that makes sense. I am checking my phone. I can't see any questions. So hopefully that was useful.
Okay, so yeah, an interesting chat with Simon about the Moth class, wasn't it?
Yeah, so that's going to show. This is a really quite a long chat. So Simon's ticked a lot of boxes. He's a double Olympic medalist. He's now been an international Moth sailor for over a decade. Really wonderful video to go with it from Bo Outridge. So very grateful to him for that. And he's not only talking about his past. I mean, he was a club sailor at my home club and of Calling Manners and then Weirwood, and he sort of introduced me to sailing. Indeed, I went on my first ever laser class training week down at Hayling Island because Simon couldn't do it, and I took the week off him, and I improved a huge amount under, I think it was Kathy Foster, and yeah, that helped me a huge amount. He's now professional boat builder, has been for a long time, shock sailing, so it's good to see what was happening in terms of COVID for people in the industry. And I think it's not only talking about the international moth sailor, but where he sees the future of the sport from somebody who's been here a long time.
And it was great to see Simon and some other top names popping up at the Mirror Nationals last week. It was who's who.
The next generation.
Yeah. I think Ben McCrane won it, didn't it? With his daughter, I think, who'd sort of first championship. So it was
Family sailing at its best.
Great to see it. And I think for some of the points John was making, it's such a lifelong sport, isn't it? From cradle to grave, isn't it? And,
absolutely. And there's really somebody and something in there for everybody. And we're so lucky to have that. Yeah. So lucky.
Okay, so
back to the Olympics. I'm really looking forward to. So Maddie actually reached out to me, and I don't want to spoil next show, but Maddie came through what I would refer to as a very traditional startup through dinghies, just the normal progression everybody would do before she started her kite surfing campaign. And actually, that a lot of the kite surfers are like that, coming from your traditional dinghy background. In fact, I know a few who sort of stepped in and stepped out. They've gone dinghies, kite surfing, and then back to foiling catamarans or whatever. But I just thought for people who don't know any kite surfers, I think Maddie's going to be a wonderful example, perhaps increase people's understanding. So we're back to show every 2 weeks, so it'll be live on the 24th of June.
Great, and look forward to that. And thanks, John, for joining us.
Thanks, Simon, and hopefully some more good news in the next show.
Fingers crossed, and good night. Okay.